You can go ahead and hit all four.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. VISD is so excited to offer the opportunity for you to work with Laura Cooper from Hanover County, Virginia. She is a brain science and the connection between graphic design. I'm going to call her an expert. So Laura, turning it over to you. Thank you so much for working with us today.
All right. Hello, welcome to my session. The bit.ly is down there at the bottom if you want to follow along or save it for later. It's E4D, like I4 design, VISD 22, and it's all in caps. And that will be at the bottom of every slide. So if you need to grab it as we go out the presentation or someone comes in late or something like that, it's down there at the bottom. So, all right. So who am I? My name is Laura Cooper, and I work for Hanover County Public Schools. My email is up there. I'm not really on Twitter so much anymore, so email is definitely the best way to get in touch with me. Before I was an ITRT, I taught biology for 14 years, which is kind of why I try to base everything that I do on science, right? So really, I try to design materials and design lessons that work in the way that the brain learns best. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my love of science, and then I'm going to take my passion for instruction and kind of combine them together so that when we design resources for our students, we're designing them in the way that the brain works best. Now, I'm going to mostly use Google Slides as the example in this session, but note that this applies to any resource that you're passing out to your students. This could be worksheets. It could be how you design your Schoology or your Canvas or whatever your LMS is, however you design those different features. It could be digital things you're creating for your kids to do. So just as we go through this, even though I'm talking about Google Slides, remember that this can apply to everybody. All right. So first up, we're going to start with some very, very basic information about the brain. The brain basically has three parts. You have the brainstem and the cerebellum. Those are important because they keep you alive. And then you have the cerebrum, which is the largest part of your brain and the most important when it comes to learning. So that's the part we're going to focus on today. So the cerebrum is responsible for reasoning and memory, two things that we have to have in order to take in and remember information. And learning is a science. It's not just some like magical thing that just happens where all of a sudden we remember something. There's science and there's biology behind it. So basically, when we hear new information, our brain is working to say, okay, is this a baby, right? Is this brand new information that I've never heard before? Or is this old information or is related to old information? And your brain starts to try to categorize this as like, where do I put this? If the information is related to something they already know, that memory is strengthened. So this is why it's important to teach our students things frequently to relate new information to old information, because what we're doing is we're strengthening those memories. I'm always going to use a dog as my example, but let's say someone tells you some new fact about a dog, right? Well, in your brain, you should already know what a dog is. So all you're doing is you're strengthening that concept of dog. So now if you take that to the content that you're teaching in your class, and you can somehow tie the new things that you're teaching into old things, it's not just good pedagogy. There's the science behind why it works. It strengthens those memories and makes it easier for your students to recall them. All right, if the information is new, your brain first has to decide, right, is this something that I need to remember? And if it is, it's going to move it to long-term storage. If you think about it, our brains are constantly processing information. For example, I'm sitting in a room right now where there are two screens in front of me. There's a person on my left. The walls are gray. The tablecloth is white. And my brain is going like, what in this room is something that I really need to remember? So first it's going to decide, do I need to remember? Is this important? And if it is, it's going to move it to long-term storage. But this happens in an instant and definitely is not always perfect. Sometimes our brain will forget things that it really should remember. And this is why teaching things to our kids recently helps, because the more often our brain hears it, right, the more likely it is to say, oh, you know what, this might be important. Let me put this into long-term storage. And sometimes things that we say, okay, we need to remember this, we just don't. And so when we say things frequently, we're also more likely to say, okay, this is important, move it to long-term storage. Sorry, so we can improve the efficiency, or in education speak, we call that fluency of learning, by, like I've been saying, teaching things frequently and recently. As we know, it's also helpful to build connections between existing knowledge and new information. This again strengthens those memories that we already have. Tying the information to emotions. Emotions are related to memory. So if something is sad and we share content that evokes that sad emotion, we're going to strengthen a memory we already have. But the one we're going to talk about in this session is how we can promote learning by reducing distractions. I'm a big believer in learning theories, and one of my favorite ones is cognitive load, just because I think it's so simple for people to understand, and then also we can do something about this one. So first of all, students and all people in general have a limit to how much our brains can take in. And at some point, we're going to overload mental capacity, and our brains are just not going to be able to take in information. That process where we move things to long-term storage, right? It gets backed up, it gets full, it doesn't happen. And we have all different kinds of loads or stresses that we're putting on our brains. The first is intrinsic. Intrinsic is basically just how difficult a subject is, or a topic, like calculus, right? There's nothing we can do about calculus to make it easier or harder. It kind of is what it is. Now we can explain things in different ways, but the topic is what the topic is, right? So that one's kind of neutral. There's not much we can do about that one. And then there's extrinsic distractions. And this is the one where we really can make a big difference. Extrinsic, think EX, right, always means external or exit. So these are things outside of the body, exiting, external of the body. So these are things like how we design our resources that we can use to reduce these distractions. And that's the one we're really going to focus on. The last kind of load that our brain takes in is germane. And these are the relationships between new information and old information. And we've kind of already talked about that one. We want that arrow to go up. We want to increase those relationships. Okay, the second theory I want to talk about is dual coding. And this is the idea that your brain takes in information through two pathways. There's the things that we say out loud, and then there's the things that we're looking at. If both pathways are activated, our brains are more likely to move that information to long-term storage. For example, I can say the word dog, right? Said it out loud, and only one channel of your brain is activated. If I show you a picture of the word dog, now I've activated both channels, and your brain is more likely to complete that step of moving things from new information to long-term storage. Now, on that, spelling out dog, D-O-G, is a visual thing. Your brain, though, has to say, okay, that's a D, that's an O, that's a G. I put those together, and it spells dog. Whereas when we show an image of a dog, it happens almost instantly. So in some ways, pictures are more efficient than words. Of course, there's times that you need to have words in your presentation. I have them here. But if we can use pictures instead, it just takes a little bit of the work off of our brains. Okay, here's where graphic design comes into play. By having quality graphic design, and you're going to see it's pretty simple, we're going to decrease that cognitive load that's put on our brains. We can take away those extrinsic or those external distractions to make our brains not have to work so hard. And by saying things aloud and including visuals, including text, we can also increase retention by making things more memorable. So we should be intentional in how we design our resources for students so that we can accomplish both of those goals. So for this next part, I'm going to go into some graphic design basics. I need a Diet Pepsi break. Okay. So I need to say, I have a degree in biology and a master's in instructional design and technology. What I don't have is a degree in graphic design. It's just something that I've been really interested in for like ever. I've done a lot of research. I've learned about it, a lot about it, but I don't have a background in this. So what I'm going to share with you are very, very simple things, but that can easily be applied to the resources that we create for our students. All right, so first up, fonts. When it comes to creating anything you're going to put in front of students, you want to have 3 fonts maximum. I try to honestly stick with 2. You want to have one heading, right? Those are the things that are big and bold. And you want to have one text for your text boxes or your information that you're sharing, and maybe one more text if you have something else you want to like delineate or separate from the rest of it. So 3 fonts maximum. When you're choosing your fonts, you want to separate what is a heading from what is text in 2 different ways. You can choose a font that is handwritten and then 1 or 2 fonts that are block script, or you can choose a font that is serif, which means with feet. So if you look at the word serif right there, you can see that at the bottom of all the letters, it has like that little line at the bottom. Those are called feet. And then choosing one that is sans serif or without feet. And if you look at the word sans serif, you can see that it doesn't have the little lines at the bottom, right? So that is without feet. Now I'm going to get out of this for a second. I'm going to open up a Google Doc. I know there's like a million ways to do this. That is easier than what I just did, but we're going to go with that. All right, so here I am. I'm in a Google Doc, and I want to add a font. All right, so the default is always going to be Arial. Honestly, I could spend a long time looking at fonts, but Arial is a pretty good one to pick from. But when you're choosing, if you click this drop down right here, you'll see where it says more fonts. One of the really nice things about Google is that you have access to thousands of fonts for free. All you need to do is click it, and then it will forever show up in your list of fonts that you have to choose from. But what I really want to show you is right here, where if you click all fonts, you can choose display. And then this is going to bring up a large font that, or a bolder font that you can use as a heading. And you can see I've selected a lot of those. You could then choose, there's also handwriting. So if you wanted to separate things by like kind of curved letters and straight letters, that's fine too. You want to make sure that it is both pretty and readable. That's really important there. Then you can also break things down by fonts with serif. These are the ones with feet, or sans serif. These are the ones without feet. So Google kind of makes it easy for you to find fonts in those 2 different categories. By selecting like a display and a serif, you now know you have 2 fonts that contrast each other. Or you can do a serif and a sans serif or something like that. I can get lost in the world of fonts. So sometimes I truly set a timer for like 10 minutes. And that's what I give myself, where I will spend all day looking at fonts and trying to find the right combination and things like that. And again, just in case you didn't know, to get there, I just right here where I would choose Arial, I clicked the drop down and I went to more fonts. So I just wanted to show you that that filter is built in for you. All right, close out of that. Okay. Next one is colors. Typically, same as fonts, when you're choosing 3, you also want to choose no more than 3 colors. Black and white don't count. So as you can see in this presentation, I went with a blue, a purple, an orange, and then kind of like a grayish black and white. Those are my colors, right? So 3 colors other than black and white. If you have no idea where to start, I included a link right here where it says, not sure what works together. And I don't know if you've heard of this one before, but this is, I pronounce it coolers. I don't know how you really pronounce it, but I pronounce it Coolers. It's free. So once you go there, you click start the generator, and then it's just going to bring up some random colors. If you don't like any of them, you just hit the space bar and it's going to shuffle through the colors, right? Just giving you different palettes that go well together. When you find one that you like this denim blue is pretty, you can just hit this lock down here. So that one locks that one into place. And then when you hit space, now it's going to bring up colors that complement that one. So like this peach is kind of pretty, so I can lock that one into place. And you kind of just keep doing that until you find, here's my 3 colors plus my black and white to use in my presentation. Now, let's say I wanted to bring this yellow over. If I click right here, it says copy hex. So I'm going to copy that code. I'm going to come over to my presentation. I'm going to click my 3, and now I'm going to change the color. So this is word art, which is typically what I use to create things in Google Slides. So I want to change the color of it. So I'm going to click my paint bucket. I'm going to come down here to the custom. I'm going to paste in the code I just copied, hit enter, and now that color has changed and it will show up here in my custom toolbar. So I could go back and I could grab the hex codes for all of the colors, right? And I could change all of these to match the colors that I just pulled from Coolers. So that's one way to use it. I'm going to go back to match my theme though. Another thing I learned about actually at the conference yesterday was this thing called color.adobe.com. And I put it in the speaker notes down here at the bottom. So this does a couple things. Once it comes up, you have to log in with Google. And then if you click this accessibility tools right here, there's a couple different things you can do. Let me see, tools. If I come over here to contrast checker, I can actually paste in a hex code. I closed out the other one, so we're just going to use these 2. And then it tells me, right, what is my contrast ratio? Does this fit? Does it not fit? Actually, this one, these 2 colors fail because if I use a pink background and the blue words, it doesn't have enough contrast for somebody who might be colorblind to be able to see the difference in the 2 colors. But it's telling me that if I use a size 18 font and above, it will work, and it will work for graphics. So that's just kind of another way you can go back and kind of check it. It also will tell me if it's colorblind safe. So I can kind of drag these around, right? And get the colors that I want. And it will, and I can paste in my hex codes right here. And it will actually tell me, are these colors safe for, what will someone who's colorblind see when they're looking at the colors that I picked? So this is especially helpful if you know you have somebody that you're presenting to that is colorblind, but it might just be something that you want to consider in general. So again, I put that link down there in the speaker notes. All right. The next thing that we want to talk about is contrast. And this doesn't just mean contrasting colors, although that's important like we just saw. This also can mean how you draw attention to the information you really want your students to remember. So, for example, if you came into this room and you saw nothing, right, you probably are going to notice the word shapes because more than anything, it stands out from all of the other words up here on the screen. And to me, that and color are if you take anything away from this slide, that's the thing that I want you to see and remember. So I'm drawing attention to that word by using contrast. You have to be careful with this though. I, at some points in my life, have read a textbook and had a highlighter, and I highlight all the things that are important. Then when I get to the very end, I've realized I've highlighted the whole page and then nothing is important. Sometimes I do that with my favorites in Google Drive, where I'll just go through and I favorite a whole bunch of things, and then my favorite is just as unorganized as my Google Drive. So just like in those 2 examples, you want to be mindful that you're only adding contrast to the items if they remember one word on your screen, what is the most important thing you want to remember? All right, the next thing is alignment. And alignment is important because our brains subconsciously are thinking, well, why is this one justified to the left and this one's in the center and this just looks messy? And our brains are paying attention to that, even if we don't know that they are. And that's taking attention away from what we're trying to teach. So the only way things can ever be random is if a computer does it. Otherwise, there's always some bias in where we put our items. So the best thing to do is to never try to make it random, give it some sort of alignment. And again, Google has some things that help to make this easier. So I'm going to bring over, here I have, right, the letters for the word align, and I tried to make them random, right? It doesn't look random, it just looks messy. These are word art letters. So I'm going to select, oops, I don't want that. I'm going to select all of these letters. And now Google has some tools to make this easy. If I come over here to arrange and I choose align and then center, it's automatically going to line them up in the center. So they're all perfectly centered with each other. Then if I come back and I choose arrange and distribute, I choose vertically. Now they automatically evenly space themselves out. So I don't need to worry about playing and trying to make it perfect. And what it's going to do is it's going to spread them out from wherever you put the first item to the last item. So they're equally centered between the A and the N. So it's not necessarily on the page, but it's from whatever the top or the bottom or the left or the right is, however you have it set up. That's how it will distribute. So again, I'll show you, let me go back to how it's all messy. So again, I just selected each letter. I come over here to where it says arrange. And now let's say this time I want to align them to the left. Okay, it will do that. And then I could say, okay, arrange. I mean, if I distribute them horizontally, it's going to go right back to how it was because these are meant to be vertical. So if I go to arrange, distribute, and I choose vertical, now they're evenly spaced out. I want to align them back in the center so they look better. And there we go. Only took a couple clicks and I got it to look exactly how I want it to look. Right, so let me move those guys to the side. Oops, not that. I'll leave them there. All right, the next thing is images. So we talked about how when you see a word, your brain sees each letter of that word as a separate image. So like it has to recognize that the C is the C and the H is the H and so on. And then it needs to say, okay, well, C, H together says ch. And then it has to, you know, put the other letters. What do they sound like? Oh, that says choose. And that takes a long time. I mean, it's milliseconds, but comparatively a long time to showing a simple image of an object. And I say simple for a reason. Right here, I have a picture of a dog. It's a really simple little icon. And that little picture of a dog doesn't evoke much emotion, right? It's just an icon of a dog. And in this case, dog is not the most important thing on my screen. I'm using it as an example. I'm not trying to evoke any memories or any emotions with the word dog. But if I put up a cute picture of a puppy, everybody here would be like, oh, that's a cute puppy. I had a cute puppy, but once my cute puppy was brown, it ate grass. My cute puppy tore up the couch, right? So now we're starting to have all of these other thoughts, which at sometimes can be great. Sometimes we want our students to focus on the picture. But when we don't want them to focus on the picture, we want to keep our images super simple so that they're focusing on the content instead. And again, you want to make sure you say it aloud. You want to make sure you have it written, and you want to make sure you have a visual. And obviously this isn't for every single word on your screen. That would be crazy, but it's for the most important words that you have, the ones you really want your kids to remember. So again, I have some resources for you in the speaker notes. So the first one, I don't know whether you pronounce it flaticon or flat icon. I tend to say flaticon. It's totally free. You can log in. And then you can pretty much search for anything. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to search for the word dog, hit enter, and it's going to bring up almost 25,000 dog icons. I can then search through here and find the ones that I want. Like, let's say I like this guy right here. I can click it. Okay. Once you've logged in, you have the ability to edit the icon. So one of the things I could do is I could say, okay, you know what? I want to change the color of this collar to match the theme of my presentation. So I just click the collar right here. I can paste in that hex code that I have copied still magically. Hit click off of it. And now I changed the color of the dog's eyes. Well, that's not good. There we go. Now the collar is blue. So again, we can change our images to match the colors of the theme. So that's flat icon or flat icon. The other one that I like a lot is the noun project. The noun project is a little simpler because everything is going to be just one color. If you have a paid account, you can go through and you can change the color of these icons to again match the color of your theme. And you'll see that all of the icons that I use actually in this presentation came from the noun project because I wanted them super simple. I wanted to keep to my color scheme, and I wanted to make sure that they weren't distracting. They added to it, but they weren't evoking all these other thoughts and emotions that were distracting you from what I was talking about. All right, and there is some science behind this. It's called the picture superiority effect, which basically, if I just were to write the word circle, and then 72 hours later, I asked you, well, what did I write on the board? What word was it? Only 10% of you would remember it. But if I drew a circle and I asked you, well, what shape did I draw on the board? Or what did I draw on the board? 72 hours later, 65% of you are going to remember that later. So think when you're teaching your students vocabulary, if you can find a picture, a simple picture to accompany the word, that is how you can get your students to remember. Now, all of these things we've talked about in graphic design, it's not just about making it pretty. In fact, it really has nothing to do with making it pretty. It has to do with making things easy for our students to understand. Okay. 3 fonts, not because that's what looks good, but because any more than 3 fonts is distracting. The brain is spending time processing the fonts and not spending as much time on the content. Same goes with colors. Same goes with contrast, right? This is how we can intentionally draw our students' focus to a certain word. Alignment, it's not about pretty, it's about simple, it's about easy for the brain. And then the same go with very simple images. One of my favorite quotes is by Alice Keeler, which I don't know if you know her, but she's like the Google goddess of all things. And I was at a session of hers one time, and she said, slides are free, make a new one. And that just really resonated with me, because sometimes we feel this, like we have this slide and we have to fill it, or we have to get all the information on one slide. And then when that slide's full, we'll go to the next one. But why, right? Why do we need to do that? Slides are free. Let's just make a new one. If we have a point that's really, really important, like this quote, for example, let me make it the only thing on the slide, because that's what I want you to focus on. If I add other bullets or I add pictures or things like that, I'm taking your focus away from what is most important and what I want you to remember. I also put a shape behind this. Again, I want you to see this. I want this to stand out for you. So when you are making a slides presentation, I tend to stick to the 3 bullets max per slide. Honestly, 1 is where I like to be, 1 thought per slide. These 3 really belong together, which is why I kept them together, but don't feel obligated to even have 3. Sometimes only 1 thought or 2 per slides is plenty. Also, 20-point font minimum. Someone from across the room should be able to see it. And then don't be afraid to embrace the empty space. Sometimes the empty space can really make something seem important. If it's the only thing on the slide, well, my teacher really wanted me to see this, because this is the only thing that I'm looking at right now. So don't feel like you have to fill every space on a slide or on a worksheet or on a Schoology page or whatever it is that you're building, right? Embrace the empty space. The next thing we want to do is we want to be consistent. I would rather you have horrible graphic design, but you're consistently horrible, than to have something where like one slide is pink with orange font and the next slide is fluorescent green with black font, and the next slide has a totally different font than the first two. Because every slide that you switch to, your students are going to say, whoa, why is this slide green? Wait, why are we using a different font? Whoa, why is this one have a different, layout? And they're not conscious that they're making these thoughts, but this is what their brain has to process as it's trying to figure out like what is important and what is not important. So just in whatever you choose, be consistent. You'll see that as I go through this presentation, there's things at the top, like my brain logo and the heading are on every slide in the same place. And then I have the bit.ly at the bottom on every slide in the same place, right? Because I want you to get used to that kind of structure so that after a while, your brain stops even thinking about it. Your brain knows, well, this is the logo, this is the heading, this is the bit.ly, the important information is in the middle, right? So just think about that. The other thing you want to be is intentional. For example, every time in this presentation, I have the word cerebrum, I made it orange. So if I go back to the beginning, click, click, click. All right, here we go. So if you'll notice, the cerebrum in my diagram is orange, right? Its function, its most important is orange. Every time you see the word cerebrum, it's orange. Now, are students intentionally going to go, oh, the word cerebrum was orange because it was orange in the diagram? Probably not, but subconsciously, right? Are they making that connection? And if you made the word cerebrum orange every single time you presented it to your students and you used a diagram where it was orange every single time, their brains will start to make that connection, and it just makes it easier for them to remember. And it's okay if you point it out as well, but their brain will make that connection by themselves. The more consistently you do that, the more likely the brain is to make that connection. Okay. So again, it's not about making things pretty. It is about reducing distraction so that the brain does not have to work so hard. You want your students to focus on what's important, not on the design. The design should look great, but what it should do is showcase the content. And we can do that, again, by keeping things consistent, keeping them simple, and really being intentional in drawing attention to what it is we want our students to really remember. So I have a couple minute video for you.
Hi, my name is Jerson Campos. In this episode, we will focus on one of the 12 principles of multimedia learning.
Hold on. Why can't we hear it? All right. So they can hear it? Okay. I just can't hear it. Okay. All right. Take two.
Hi, my name is Jerson Campos. In this episode, we will focus on one of the 12 principles of multimedia learning. The 12 principles of multimedia learning was developed by Richard E. Mayer and has helped shape how multimedia learning is designed in ways that are consistent with how humans learn. We're going to be focusing on principle number 3, the redundancy principle. Now, this doesn't mean to repeat something over and over and over until the learner actually remembers the material. In Richard E. Mayer's book, Multimedia Learning, he states that people learn better from graphics and narration than from graphics, narration, and on-screen text. And this is where the word redundancy comes into play, because by adding graphics and narration, you are repeating the message but in different formats. This principle relies on the dual-channel assumption that people can process material both visually and auditorially. When you present the material with audio, it gets processed by their auditory channel. Adding visual elements like pictures or animations gets processed by the visual channel. These messages then get combined in their working memory for a complete and much more effective learning event than if the message was presented by visual or auditory channels alone. Well, what about learners who prefer printed words? The redundancy principle isn't a call to end all on-screen text, but it is a good practice to focus the message and select a few key words or phrases. When you add a large amount of on-screen text like what is being narrated word for word, it creates competition with any other visual elements and overworks the visual channel and can stress the auditory channel because their user is trying to figure out what to focus on. So we end up overloading the learner's processing capacity and they won't be able to recall the material. This is the limited capacity assumption. It states that humans are limited in the amount of information that can be processed in each channel at one time. This means that we can only hold a few images or words in our working memory at a time before our brains are overloaded. Now, this doesn't mean that you should do away with all text, but you should sum up the message with a few key bullet points or phrases to emphasize the important points. This will lead to better and memorable learning events. On a side note, I do on certain occasions add complete on-screen text. One of these occasions is when the material has legal disclaimers or legal information that must be read by the learner. What I've done in the past is only present the text with narration. I don't want to distract the learner from the text. I will do this for a few slides and only the text that has been designated need to know. For the rest of the slides, I present the material like I would any other course. So in short, text and narration is okay, images and narration is better, images and text and narration is not good unless you keep the text to a minimum, only emphasizing key points or phrases. Alright, well that's it for this episode. See you next.
All right, so that sort of reinforces the idea of that we need to present things to our students in different ways, right? We need to say it, we need to show them the word, and we need to show them a picture, but maybe not all at the same time, right? Sometimes less is more. I am a big supporter of putting the word with the picture, but maybe I'm not talking at the same time while I'm allowing my students to process those two different images. And after they've had the chance to process both the word and the image, then I'll start talking, because I know that I can overload their brain by presenting too much information at one time. You know, like how you go to a session or you're attending a class and there's all this stuff on the screen and the person's talking at the same time and what they're saying does not match what's written on the screen, and your brain like has to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to read the screen? Am I going to listen to the person? And the answer is it's not going to do any of it, right? What we want to do is we want to make things easy on our brain. So simple graphics so that we don't distract from, so we don't distract from the message. Keep it clear, keep it simple, keep it intentional. That lowers those extrinsic distractions, right? The things that are going on externally of our body. And we want to put the words with the pictures, and we want to say the word aloud, but we don't want to do all three of those at the same time because we want to access all channels of the brain, but we don't want to overload it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing and head to the chat. Can they all, you guys can feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, another Laura Cooper, nice. Silverman is my maiden name, so I don't think we're related. Life-changing, love it. All right, does anyone have any questions? All right, then. All right, so my name is Laura Cooper. Again, my email is lcooper@hcps.us. It's in the presentation. And this brain science graphic design, right, this is my jam. This is what I love. But I also can do other things too. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I'm always more than happy to help. And thank you for coming. Glad you enjoyed it.